Hello, welcome to Mike's Mets Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pashota. Happy Monday to you. So it was an interesting weekend series against the Washington Nationals that saw the Mets take Game 1 in a close but ultimately successful win against the Nats. And it was a win that the Mets really needed, especially coming off of a rough last game of that series against the Cincinnati Reds. So going into this series against the Nationals, it's important that the Mets try to get as many games as possible. 4 games to play. They would take Game 1, lose Game 2 in a interesting game, which saw the Mets on Saturday start the game off. It was a 1-0. Going down 1-0 in that game, then having the game delayed and ultimately postponed, leading to a lot of angry fans. There was a lot of distaste being showed towards the Nationals and the way they chose to handle that game. Ultimately, deciding to resume the game and make it a doubleheader on Mother's Day, and led to a lot of people very upset, basically, about the decision. No one really understood why they couldn't just resume the game at a later date, why they had to push an afternoon game into a 4 o'clock game. Ultimately kind of wrecked a lot of people's plans for Mother's Day, I'm going to assume. And the end result was the Mets would lose that restarted game or resumed game 3-2, and what was another situation where the Mets kind of blew situations over and over again. Thankfully, there was a happy note with this, as in that the Mets were able to salvage the second game of yesterday against the Nationals, winning 8-2, and all 8 runs coming in 1 inning against the Nationals. Max Scherzer would pitch a successful start, which was much needed. Scherzer, after some terrible performances, comes back and throws 5 innings, only last 2 hits, 1 earned run, strikes out 6. What was a successful outing for Scherzer, one that he was definitely working with, certainly kid gloves on. They had to make sure that Scherzer is able to kind of go at least 5 in these kind of starts, and if he's starting to inch towards he's not feeling good or if something's not quite right with him, they need to pull the plug. And he probably had another inning in him, but they erred on the side of caution, which was the important thing. We saw the return of Brooks Raley. Raley would not really pitch a very successful inning, but came out of it okay. And that was really it. In terms of this all kind of came into 1 inning where the Mets just beat the ever-loving hell out of the Nationals for 1 inning where they scored 8 runs. So Mark Hanna hit an RBI double, Brandon Nimmo an RBI single, Francisco Lindor an RBI single. Brett Brady walked in a run with the bases loaded, so Brady would get an RBI for that. Starling Marte, he got a RBI single. 2 RBI single. And then Canha would finish off the scoring again with another RBI single. So good game for the Met veterans, particularly Canha and Marte, who came away with 5 base hits combined for the 2 of them, drove in 4 runners between the 2 of them as well. Lindor, 2 for 5. McNeil, everybody really got base hits. Even Eduardo Escobar would get a pinch hit, batting late in the game. And this was basically what the Mets have kind of needed for a little while, was just everyone to kind of like break out of slumps. And this is basically what the Nationals should be here for. They shouldn't be giving the Mets such competitive runs against them. It's really just a situation where the Nationals are not a good team. Like the Mets should be able to handily beat them, but it's been because the Mets are so off balance this year. A situation where they have very little leeway in terms of what they can do. You have to kind of score against these teams, and you can't blow situations like they did in the earlier game yesterday. It's not Game 1; it's an earlier game. So we saw the Mets sort of kind of put it together in 1 game. We'll have to see if they do it in the next game. This has been the ongoing situation with the Mets this entire season. Has been they cannot seem to put anything together for 2 straight games. It is looks good 1 game, the next game is just horrific. And another problem has been that if one thing is working for one part of the team, let's say the Mets starter is having a good start, oftentimes the offense is not really it's not really picking it up on their ends. These are the situations where a Met pitcher might be having a great game, and at the same time they're getting maybe one or even fewer runs support. So it's a situation where maybe the Mets are actually hitting well in this game. They've driven in 6 runs. Unfortunately, the Mets starter has gotten blown out, and they've given up 7 runs. And this is all of a sudden becoming more of a football score than a baseball score. And or maybe it's a situation where both the offense and the starting pitcher have done well, but then the bullpen blows it late, and it's just nothing really working on all 3 levels. Sometimes 1 or 2 of them are working, but then the third one kind of screws up. And then if they get all 3 working together for one game, like we saw in this one, in the second game of the yesterday, seemed like everything was working great. We don't really know if that's going to be the case for today, when the Mets will finally finish up this series against the Nationals at 4 o'clock, and it's going to be David Peterson making his return after what was a ugly start, and pairing him against Patrick Corbin. I mean, this is just like the battle of the incompetence. David Peterson, after a horrific start, having to come back in and pitch because they are hurting for pitching right now. Not a situation you really want. Patrick Corbin has been well documented. After a brilliant rise, he is just shot downwards at a level that is astonishing to watch. He is widely considered the worst, best paid pitcher in baseball. He makes a lot of money, and for very poor results. It's not great to watch. This is going to be an ugly game, in my opinion. The hope is that the Mets are able to sort of keep the bats going, and at least for one more game, because the likelihood is that Peterson, because his track record has been so poor thus far early in the year, this is going to be a slug out, and which I don't really love watching. I would prefer if the Mets were coming ahead in this one. It's interesting to watch with Peterson. He's such a critical part of that rotation. He was supposed to be the depth guy, the guy that they could bring in case Scherzer was going to miss a start, or Verlander was going to miss a start, or Senga was going to be out, or anything like that, where they had, okay, we have this guy who can easily slot in to the 5th spot in the rotation without any real issues. And Peterson's lack of performance, really shocking, and he's not looked good early on. And you have to look at his record; he's 1-5. He hasn't pitched that many starts. I mean, he's old. The fact that he has so many decisions against him is, pretty demonstrative of how bad he has been early in the year. And you just have to look at his ERA also, where he has a 7.68 ERA coming into the start. The expectations are not high, and you really have to look at how this team has been constructed, where you have this guy who is supposed to be so critical to that rotation depth. How poorly he has gone so far is really indicative of how the Mets have been going this year, that they have to go back to Peterson. And you are stuck in this situation as a Met fan where you have to say, I hope Peterson can give a good start. I am not confident. I don't really feel like he is there. Peterson's been so up and down during his career. It's one of those situations where Peterson has been, last year, looked terrific. I mean, it was so good that late in the year, when the Mets had their full rotation strength back, where they had DeGrom and Scherzer and Carrasco and Bassett, and I felt bad because Peterson wasn't going to slot into that rotation, even though he probably deserved to be in there, but was basically pushed out because the Mets had 4 better pitchers, better options for the playoffs. And I was like, yes, keep him in the bullpen. Like let him be here and contribute because he'd been so effective for the Mets in numerous spot starts where they had to bring him in because Scherzer was out or DeGrom was out, and they had to lean heavily on Peterson, and he really responded. He did great. This year, they've had to lean on him again early on. The results have not been great, and this has just been sort of Peterson's MO, where he can kind of be there one day, he can not be there the next day. He has not been here any day so far. It has been a rough watch. If you are a Peterson fan, I was highly highly receptive to the idea that he was going to be in the rotation early on because he had been so good last year. Right now, he is a walking danger sign. No one really knows what he's going to do. The smart money is that it's not going to be a great start, and it's not going to be a great start for anybody. And if the weather holds up today in Washington, then we'll see probably a very ugly contest, one that really any baseball fan would not be excited to watch. But it's going to happen. The Mets have to come out of this. They need a series win. This is the most important thing. They need a series win, and if they can't win a series against the Washington Nationals, when you have to come back home and play the Tampa Bay Rays, you are in a really rough situation where it's going to get really ugly facing the Rays. They have to come into that series with some semblance of confidence, because if they are really struggling to beat the Nationals today, and they have to come back and play the Rays right after that, it's not going to feel good. You have to feel like we can't beat one of the worst teams in baseball. Now we have to play one of the best teams in baseball. You have to take this game. It's so critically important, and might be funny to hear or say during this early part of the season. But when you're going to be playing as one of Major League Baseball's best teams, you need to kind of come into that with some semblance of momentum. Like at least come into it with a win, even if it's a come behind win or whatever it is. They need to win this game and feel like they can reasonably step toe-to-toe with the Rays, because the Rays are easily considered one of the best teams in baseball, have gotten off to an incredible start, a historic start, and facing a team that is just won as consistently as the Rays have, where you're facing the Mets, a team that has been completely inconsistent early on this year. That series could be one of the roughest ones to watch as a Met fan. So an amazingly important start, which we would not have thought looking at like, oh, the fourth game of a series against the Washington Nationals. Like, who would care about this? As it turns out, it's a really important game, and one that the Mets are incredibly dedicated to win, or they should be dedicating to win, because this is not a situation where they have to be starting where they can rest people. I'm sure Showalter would like to, but they need to come into this one with all guns blazing and win this game with some level of dominance, because to go into this series against the Rays with even a little bit of doubt in terms of your abilities, it's going to be an easy sweep for the Rays. So the hope is that the Mets can kind of keep this momentum going. It was a good win yesterday. You have to make them do two in a row. And the fact is that the Mets' schedule early on this year has not been that difficult. They should be winning more games for how easy their schedule is, but they have made it incredibly difficult for themselves. They have not responded along the way so many times to the fact that their streakiness right now is all dependent right now on how well they're going to play. They're going to face off against these teams, because what is it? Their longest winning streak was 5 games. That was last month. Since then, they have not been able to consistently to win 2 in a row. The last time they won 2 in a row was when they won those 3 games against the final game against the Dodgers, and then the first 2 games against the Giants, and then lost 4 in a row. And then that sort of kicked off this really disgusting stretch for the Mets, where they have just looked completely lost and have squandered any bit of a momentum or a division lead early on this year. It's been difficult to see them play, so they have to win this game. As an important, yes. There's no question that this is one of the most important games the Mets have to play so far. Again, you wouldn't have thought it. It's a Nationals game. You're playing 4 o'clock against the Nationals, and a game that would have been expected to be meaningless, but has incredible meaning. You have to take this game. You cannot let the lower ring teams just give you fits and give you trouble, especially when you're going to be gearing up for such an incredibly important series as they're about to head into. So, if there was pressure or expectations before, they were certainly going to be some now. That was a big game for them to win yesterday because they had to make sure that they at least took 2 in the series. But one of the more intriguing games that they're going to watch, and it's going to be probably an ugly one to watch. I'm not looking forward to it. I can't say that this is going to be an exciting performance. I'm going to say it's probably going to be an absolute slugfest, which, again, the Mets should not be getting into with the Nationals. But so what we've seen so far is that David Peterson is a big question mark in terms of what his performance is going to be like from start to start. So most likely we're going to be seeing another one of his more questionable starts. Thank you for listening to Mike's Mets podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike's Mets Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go, Mets.